So, welcome to Hollywood and Sip. I'm your host, Kat Smith, and with me today I have Carol Hughes and Bruce Fredenburg, authors of Home Will Never Be the Same Again, a guide for adult children of grade divorce. How are you guys today?
Good,
Kat,
thanks.
how are you? Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and so I forgot to write down the release date. Is this already available or is it coming soon?
Yes, it was released on June 22nd.
So let's just start with what is the gray divorce revolution?
Well, the term gray divorce, I don't remember who came up with the term first because it's actually a worldwide phenomena. And it's generally considered to be people who are divorcing later in life, maybe from 50 on. And it's not just in the United States, but it's happening in Canada. In the United Kingdom, they call them silver splitters.
Mm.
And in Japan, they call it retired husband syndrome.
And actually, the researchers at Bowling Green University in 2012, when they were studying the current US Census, came up with the term gray divorce revolution. That's where the revolution part came from, when they saw that the divorce rate in the 50 plus years and older since 1990 had doubled up until 2015.
So it's not it's not a phrase that I had heard before, and I'm gonna knock on wood. I'm one of the lucky ones that my parents are still together. Over 50 years, and
Oh, good.
you got me thinking about it though. As an adult, how different it would feel
Mhm.
if my parents were to split now, as opposed to when I was a child. And so, your book really focuses a lot on helping the children. Is that correct?
Correct. And actually woven in throughout the chapters, there's help for the parents as well to understand why this is so traumatic for so many adult children. And you're right, the focus is mainly for the adult children. We do have one chapter that is for the parents. Now, how can you help your adult children going through this?
And then I was also thinking that there's probably two groups of adult children. There's probably the children who are completely devastated, like I said I would be. And then there's probably this other segment of the population who's like, well, we all saw this coming. It's about time. I mean, do you see kind of a mix of that?
Well, it's interesting that you should say that because you would think that that's true, but many people who thought their parents should divorce, they've been arguing their whole life. In fact, in my case, my parents didn't actually divorce, but there was a time when my mother told me that she was thinking very strongly of divorcing my father. And I was already grown. I was 30, 31. I was in graduate school. I was married, had an independent life. And I was really surprised by how much it disturbed me. It's got me thinking about what am I going to do? How much is it going to affect me? What's going to happen to both of them? Eventually, they didn't divorce because my mother's health was deteriorating. But I was really stunned by how much it affected me. And I was grown.
And Kat, the little bit of research that there is on this population of the adult children who are adults when their parents are divorcing shows that about 50% of the adult children are very upset. Some use the word devastated, some moderately upset, moderately to severely upset. So that's quite a large number.
And I could see how there would be a lack of information on the subject, because I think when you're going through it and you have small children, there's things like going through court, there's group counseling and things like that. And I could see that later on in life, it wouldn't be as documented.
Absolutely not, yes.
That's one of the things that contributes to people underestimating how much it's going to affect adult children. Most people divorce in the courts. They use litigation. And what the message is that they hear is your adult children, they're not even considered here. They're unimportant. They have no standing here. And for a parent, that's very seductive. I mean, it's who doesn't want to believe their kids are going to be okay and it's fine. And it's one less thing for them to worry about while they're overwhelmed by their own emotions.
Mm-hmm. So that indicates why there's so little support for these adult children. You know, really court models for us what we think about divorce. That was well said, Bruce.
And you both are co-authors of this book. Do you want to give us a little bit of your individual backgrounds?
Sure. I had never intended to write a book about divorce because when I was 3.5, my parents divorced. I never knew them together ever, and I never knew them to be peaceful and respectful toward each other. I was actually raised with my dad and my grandmother, and when I was 4.5, 5, they were in a custody battle, and in those days, the courts put the child in protective custody. So I was in a county facility with all kinds of kids, and I say it felt like I was in the book, Oliver. It was not a fun time. So it wasn't a population I was intending to ever work with. But sometimes, shall I say, fate has a different plan for us.
And how about you, Bruce?
Well, I shared with you my one experience with when my parents almost divorced. But I've been a licensed therapist in California since, the early 80s. And over time, my practice, I would have clients come in who that's exactly what was happening to them. Their parents were going through a divorce, or they were suffering from a badly handled divorce by themselves or their parents. And then in the early 2000s, from different channels, Carol and I were both approached by a group of family law attorneys who wanted to find a better way to do it. And so their idea was, as one of them put it, I'm tired of winning cases while destroying families. So there's a whole model where we do it as a team approach.
It's hard to work in this field as family therapists and not encounter divorce, as Bruce was just explaining. So over the years, I think that's how both of us became more and more interested in helping minor children as well as adult children.
And I have a pretty staggering statistic from your press release. You said that over 600,000 people over 50 years file divorce. Is that every year, or is that?
Yes,
so
every year,
I mean,
in the U.S.
That is just such an outrageous number. And I'm wondering also, do you think that the current stay-at-home orders and the coronavirus, do you think that's going to possibly increase those numbers?
Yes, we do. And here's why. We're not proponents of divorce, but if people are going to divorce, let's do it in a more family-focused, peaceful way. The reason we believe it's going to increase is we've seen that throughout the U.S. history. When there were crises like this, similar, not the same, of course, the divorce rate rose. And if we are following China and Italy, who were very hardly hit by the coronavirus, now their divorce rates are spiking. So we're expecting, divorce professionals are expecting the same in the US.
And I imagine that statistic covers probably second and third marriages also, but
Yes.
Your book is really focused on sort of the first marriage breaking up at a later point in life. Is that correct?
Well, we also touch on the fact that there are blended families. And, the statistics for first marriages are roughly 50% if you count separations. In second marriages, it's closer to 73%, and it's even worse for third marriages. So the adult children may have had a number of parental figures in their life going forward that all have to be taken into account.
Okay, and that makes sense. For example, Carol, you said that your parents split before you even knew them as together.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see how that would apply to you, for instance, if your parents later in life, it would be your second parents. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's very common. And there is a term that we use in our field called blended family, where there are multiple parents, multiple step siblings, et cetera. You can imagine grandparents, step grandparents. You can imagine how complicated that gets when divorce occurs for holidays and get-togethers, family get-togethers, and so forth.
Well, and that leads into what I was going to ask next, which is, what are some of the topics that you cover in the book that you help people through?
Well, first of all, there's just the understanding the information. The first step to solving a problem is to be aware of it. And then we have a whole chapter on hope and healing. We also have fictionalized different people and blended them all up so nobody would know who is who, but we provide some examples of what the adult parents are going through that excuse me, that they're sometimes so overwhelmed with their own confusion and fear and anger, they don't even know what's going on with the kids. And then so that the adult children can understand what's going on with their parents, they're not deliberately trying to make their life awful, they're just rolling. And then to help the parents understand the most important things that they can do so they don't add to the pain of the family.
And we also educate about grieving and loss. The main issue that the adult children are struggling with, if we could use one term, is loss. And that when we have loss, when humans have loss, we grieve. So that's an important concept that we educate about. The different life stages that the adult children are in, we talk about that so that each adult child can relate to where they are in that adult life stage. We educate about boundaries, how to set boundaries with your parents, and how to plan your own traditions maybe for holidays, celebrations. And then, as I mentioned before, there's also a chapter about dating, when the parents start dating, remarrying, and then a chapter that is for the parents to think about. These are things to do, these are things not to do to help your parent, your child, your adult child, and even grandchildren adjust better.
And there's even a whole chapter on communication. You know, what works, what doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
what you really need to avoid.
And sibling relationships, often the siblings line up on opposite sides, you know, supporting a different parent. And that's like war. You know, a lot of adult children say it feels like I was in a war zone. So how to deal with those situations too.
Or what happens if one parent needs financial support, or one parent just needs a lot of support in general? And how does the adult child deal with that without losing their own marriage if they're in one?
Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of these adult children are in what we call the sandwich generation. So they've got their own children of whatever ages, maybe they're even grown. If their parents are 60 or 70 when they're divorcing, which happens, those adult children might have their own children grown and grandchildren, and then they've got their older parents that they're caring for. So they're caught in the middle. We call it the sandwich generation. It's very stressful for these adult children who are in their careers and also trying to manage their own families. Maybe they're even going through divorce. You know, it can become very complicated.
I can see that. What are some of the boundaries that an adult child may want to set with their parents?
Well, families all have their own understandings. Some are spoken, some are not, or what are the appropriate boundaries for that family? So when things come up like how to help or how much is too much or too little to help a parent that needs financial help, sometimes it's useful to talk to other family members and come up with a group decision. One of the biggest mistakes happens when parents want to use their adult child as their confidant. And there's a lot of things that make people uncomfortable. They don't want to know that about their parent, all the missteps or the bad things about them. And so that's a real boundary issue, you know, and parents need to understand that they can't expect their child to be as happy as they are. They may be moving on. They want to introduce their new significant other to the family, bring them all in. And that's a boundary issue too. Sometime that might be okay, but that should really be handled in a very careful way.
Another boundary is when sometimes the more hurt parent, maybe the one who didn't want the divorce, as Bruce mentioned, will use their adult child as a confidant or even a dating buddy. You know, they want to go out dating together or talk to their adult child about, you know, their sexual dating life. Obviously, those are not healthy boundaries. So we cover a lot of boundaries like that for the adult children to be able to set with their parents. And another example is when one parent tries to have the adult child align with him or her against the other parent. And a great statement that the adult child can say is, you know, I love both of you and I'm not going to align with either one of you. I want the ability to have a good relationship going forward with both of you.
Yeah, a real crucial distinction is, well, you know, in your own life, Kat, your parents have a different relationship with each other than they have with you. So if they split apart or they stay together, that's really about them. But you've got a different, unique relationship with each of your parents and a unique relationship with the two of them as your parents. And those boundaries are really important for the all the whole family to keep in mind.
It's probably good to consider what boundaries you had before breaking up and bring them into the breakup.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If they were good, healthy
Yeah.
boundaries. Yeah.
Right, if they were healthy ones, sure. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And so, Carol, you said that you didn't expect to be an author. What brought you both to writing the book originally?
Okay. I didn't expect to be an author about this topic. I've
Okay.
always wanted to write books. In fact, Bruce and I joke, we've got how many folders in our computers over the years of this idea, that idea to write a book. But the collaborative practice group that Bruce described earlier of divorce professionals who are working to be in peaceful processes for their clients, they really embrace the idea that adult children should have a voice, that they should be heard. And so I'd written several blogs about it for our local practice group website. And then a New York Times reporter contacted me to interview me for an article. And when that hit, obviously the New York Times, I had parents, adult children, other therapists calling me, emailing me from all over the nation. And so that was really nice. And I was happy to help them in a mediation way. And then that following September, my agent, who is now our agent, both of our agents, contacted me and said, would I consider writing a book about this, because there's nothing on it out there on this topic. And I said, sure. When something comes to you like that, you say yes. And then Bruce and I have been colleagues and friends for years. And I said, would you like to do it with me? And he said, yes. And the rest is history, as they say, 4 years later. 4 long years later.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was saying yes to at the time, okay, well, we've had a lot of experience. We'll just put this, get this done. And yeah, 4 years later of research, writing, rewriting, editing, re-editing, rewriting. Well, you know how it goes.
Wow. Yeah. And I was thinking that another factor in the adult children being kind of tossed to the wayside, I think that there's a lot of parents out there who maybe wait until their kids are off in college, like it's been building up for so long, thinking that that's less hurtful to the children than, but in my mind, I think that could actually potentially be worse for the children, because they put up with whatever anxiety and anger the parents have all along. What do you think about that?
Yes, it can cause quite an identity crisis, Kat. Very common sentences that adult children say in that situation was my whole life smoke and mirrors? Was it all a facade, like at Disneyland, the facade? What was real, what wasn't real? They raised me with this values. Now one of my parents has had an affair, or they both had an affair. They raised me, marriage was forever. I mean, the list goes on of what the shock is. And they start questioning their whole history, their whole family history, and what their image was in the image of their parents out in the community and family members. It's quite unsettling. Would be, quite unsettling.
Kat, it also hits people at different stages too. You mentioned an adult child in college. Well, most adult children in college aren't really adults, because legally you're an adult, but I think back, not really. And if you're dependent on your parents, their first thought is going to be, what's going to happen to me? Especially if one of the parents had an affair and there's a new person. Is that person going to be an obstacle to me being helped or not helped? Or maybe, they love their parents. Maybe they're just going to accept that something's going to happen, but it's not going to be pleasant for them. And then if someone's been married for a while and they have kids, and the kids are used to going to grandma and grandpa's, and they're really close to both of them. And then the holidays, 2 Thanksgivings now, and are the kids going to lose are they going to lose contact with one of the grandparents? Are the grandparents going to lose contact with with some of the kids because one of the spouses is so angry at those parents for supporting their child rather than both of them? And so that's a whole different set of circumstances. So it's really hard to predict what's going to happen to who.
Can we flip the script just a little bit and maybe speak to the parents out there who may be listening and are considering divorce right now? What is something you could say to them that they could take action on right now to maybe help their children a little bit, now knowing that their adult children are going to be affected by this?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Kat. I would say absolutely number one is simply listen to what their adult children are saying. and don't have their defense or their judgment ready to say to their adult children. In fact, the research shows that simply listening deeply, without judgment, without criticism, without responding, is part of healing. So that would be the number one thing I would say to the parents. And then secondarily, what we've been talking about, as you said, flip what we were talking about with the adult children to have the parents here, which we do go into in the chapter for parents, is don't discuss your dating, sex life with your adult children. Don't expect them to be as happy as you are. Hear their feelings. Don't expect them to be overjoyed to meet a new significant other. Think about how the holidays and all the traditions are going to be affecting them. Think about if your life had been pulled out from under you, how would that maybe be affecting you? Because the adult parents and the adult children are in different life spaces, of course. The parents are going towards something, especially the parent that wanted the divorce, they're going toward a new life. The adult children are grieving all the losses from their life. So to be cognizant of that as well, I would say to the parents.
Two big things I'd like to add to that is I always caution parents to not only avoid going to your adult children to have them take your side, but talk to other family members and don't allow them, in fact, insist that they not allow their kids, because that's what they are to them, their kids, to be sucked into this war, this family war, because once sides are taken, it's going to be hard to undo that later on. And there can be real barriers between reuniting at that point. And so the parents have to take a stand of not allowing it, even when the kids want to, just not to allow it. And then the other thing would be, one of the most important decisions is what divorce process do the parents want to take? And even if they're already in litigation, which is a much more adversarial approach, two attorneys only hear from one person how bad the other one is. And then they react to that, and then the war goes up. But there's also mediation, including team mediation. And then there's collaborative practice, and those are non-adversarial, non-court processes, but all of the agreements are actually entered into the court, and they're legal and they're enforceable. But there's very little public information about the privacy of the parents and what went on in their life. And that can spare people a lot of pain too.
And those out-of-court processes are family-focused.
Yes.
So that it focuses on what's happening with the minor and the adult children.
And so to speak personally for a moment, I am part of a blended family. I live with my boyfriend and his two girls, and their mom has the boyfriend, and they live together also. And we're equal sharing of the kids. And so that also means that there's now quadruple the grandparents and all the different families. And something I was thinking about today is that I'm guilty of kind of looking at, the youngest is 11. So I kind of look at it like, okay, so 7 more years and then we don't really have to deal with the whole divorce thing. And I'm realizing today that's not actually true. So why might that not be true?
Well, parents, go ahead, Carol.
Okay, because for that 11-year-old, he or she has lost his family, intact family, his mom and dad being together forever. Even if the 4 of you are very friendly, which is great, it sounds like you probably are, it's still a loss. It's always a loss for those children. However, the good news is that if you are friendly and getting along, many kids tell us, minor children, I have enough love for everybody. And the 4 people in the parental role, I heard you say boyfriend and your girlfriend, but sometimes they even go to, and the bio parents go to like those parent teacher conference, and the kids feel that additional support. So that can be a positive as well. But to be aware, first of all, that the loss is there usually for the children.
And going forward, their bio parents may be divorced, and they might want to call each other my ex, but to the kids, they're never going to be their ex anything. Each one of those, it's always going to be their other parent. And then in the lives of the one, they weren't your kids, but you're going to be a parental figure for them. In fact, I'm a stepfather myself. And it's a real balancing act to encourage the relationship with the other parent, and to make sure that at the beginning that they understand that you're having them do things because mom wanted them or dad wanted you to have them do that, not to assume parental authority. But over time, you'll become a parental figure to them, and the loss of you would be really impactful for them as well. And you might find it's a loss for yourself as well.
Oh, for sure, because we've reached the point where I've now been in their lives longer than I haven't been in their lives. And I think what you just said about the ex is particularly important, because something I didn't consciously do this. I never say his ex-wife, his ex. I always just say their mom, or I'm the other mom, or things like that. So now I'm kind of proud of myself for never having adopted that habit, because I think you're right. They divorced, but to the kids, they're always the parents. So I think that was a really important statement.
Thank you. One of the things that I used to do when, because my daughter, and she would call me her stepdad, because she had and always has had an ongoing relationship with her father, and we wanted that to happen. And he's remarried, but when we meet in public someplace, or there's one of those family celebrations where everybody's going to show up, my wife's former husband and his wife, we always introduce each other as, well, we raised a stepdaughter together.
Yeah. Yeah, because the labels do get really confusing. And that is a thing. They were young when I came in, so the mom label is really strong with them. But they've done things like so my name is Kat, so when I first came in, I was Kitty Cat Meow Meow was their nickname for me. Now I'm Meow Ma, so my name is evolving.
Yes, and that shows your relationship is even. That's what so many people in your position, new person into the kids' lives, no matter what ages the kids are, that new person doesn't realize that the relationships have to evolve. You don't just put two people together and then bingo, it's a relationship. That has to evolve, and they have to trust you. It sounds like with those great nicknames they've given you, you've got a good relationship, it sounds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's end with, what is one step that someone going through this on either side? We talked about the listening for the parents divorcing. What's maybe one step that the adult children can take today, knowing that their parents are going into the divorce? What is the first thing, other than buying your book, what's the first thing they should do?
I think what we did in the beginning of the book was educate about attachment bonds, and that the parents have attachment bonds to each other, to their own children, to their own mothers and fathers that are a generation ahead of them, and to realize that divorce often, if it doesn't break those bonds, it stresses those bonds terribly. And so for adult children to realize that their parents are dealing with loss too. Most people don't get married thinking, okay, let's plan when we're going to get divorced. That's not usually talked about. So for everyone to be more understanding of where each person is in this life process of dealing with loss.
That just brought up a pet peeve of mine. I wish everybody in the world would stop saying, that's my future ex-wife. Don't go into marriage if you're already thinking about the divorce.
Right. Yes, I agree. That's not a very positive way to be looking at it. Yeah.
Although on a kind of a related note, if one of the things, if people are going to do prenups, the best time to do it is with a collaborative attorney. Well, everybody still cares about the other person, so that one person is not going to take advantage of the other because they wouldn't ever want to, and same for them. So it's the safest, best time to make those plans, and then you'll probably never need them because you didn't start a fight at the beginning.
Oh, that makes sense. So you've been listening to Hollywood and Sip. I'm still Kat Smith, and I've been talking to Carol Hughes and Bruce Fredenburg, the authors of Home Will Never Be the Same Again, a guide for adult children of gray divorce. Do you want to give out some links? How can people find the book? How can they follow you? Do you have social media?
Sure. The book is available on Amazon in print, audiobook, as well as Kindle. And we're just getting our social media campaign going. We haven't been therapists who did a lot of social media, but we know that that's a great way to get the word out. And so we're in the process of doing that. So pay attention on Facebook and other Instagram and other media, you'll see us popping up very soon. We didn't know exactly when the book was going to come out. It was scheduled to come out earlier this year, but when COVID hit, obviously that impacted the publisher as well. So we found out a couple of weeks ahead of time that it was going to really be ready. So we were a little behind the curve on the social media part.
And so we really appreciate you giving us this opportunity, Kat, because the way we wrote the book was to be able to give education to the parents and to the adult children, and in ways that they could accept it. Because if they start talking to each other, they may be so hurt, but this is just all laid out for them.
Right. Well, thank you so much for writing this book. I think it's going to help a lot of people, and I wish you luck with it. And thanks for chatting with us today.
Thanks for having us, Kat. We hope it'll help a lot of people too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.